Elden Ring Nightreign is finally here, and one thing that stands true to the core of any Soulsborne title is that this game can be incredibly difficult. One thing that can be especially frustrating is getting to the end of night boss, be that day 1 or 2, or the Nightlord themselves, only to feel like you aren't strong enough and see victory slip from your grasp. Welcome to the Ning Plays channel. Today we will be going over some important tips to make your runs in Elden Ring Nightreign go a lot smoother. So do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, tons of Nightreign guides and content going up, so do make sure you stay up to date. So, the number one most important thing I would say to your runs in Nightreign is what we refer to as pathing. So, powering up and getting good equipment is crucial for your run, and you need to know how to do it both quickly and effectively. At the start of every run, you're always dropped by a small group of enemies and a grace that you should kill and then get straight to level 2. From there, you need to look at the map and figure out your best route in order to hit certain landmarks in quick succession. Things to look out for right away are churches, which will give you an extra charge to your healing flask, and the enemy camps that offer certain loot drops. These drops are very important for runs depending on the Nightlord you are going against, but we'll talk about that a bit more later. You need to ideally plan a route that allows you to hit a couple of these locations quickly, ideally towards the outer edge of the circle, as those are the places that you'll lose access to as the day progresses and the circle closes in. From that point you can start to work inwards and hit more of these locations that follow a natural path. Always keep an eye out for chests in the enemy camp that could reward you with a stone sword key as purple item drop, as you can include a visit to an Everjail in your progress path to take out another mini boss and gain more rewards. Also, if you can find one along your path, going into the mines can not only contain a mini boss but also the potential to pick up smithing stones that can allow you to upgrade your weapons for that extra little bit of power. As long as this all goes well and you maximize your pathing to hit as many of these locations as possible, you can regularly hit level 6 or 7 on the first day, even 8, 9, potentially 10 if things go really well. The next thing to be careful of is do not overcommit. If you come across a mini boss during the day that seems like they'll be too tough for your current level, don't get stuck fighting a long drawn out battle that will take up loads of time, potentially only to be abandoned anyway if you realise, you've spent a good solid amount of time and only done, a third of the boss's HP. The time you have before the storm closes in is precious, and you need to be getting as many mini bosses down, as many buffs and as many loot drops as possible. Likewise, if you are fighting a boss, but the circle begins to close in on your position, you need to be able to judge very quickly whether you can actually finish defeating the boss, grab your loot and then get out in time, or whether you'll risk being caught in the storm. Being in the storm for a short time is not the end of the world, but depending on the path you need to take, one wrong move could drop you into a ravine with no jump spot nearby, and before you know it, you've died in the storm and you lose a level. And of course that hurts your overall chances as you are pushed closer to that final boss with no chance to go back and get the runes that you've dropped. If you are going to brave a trek through the storm, make sure you hit a site of grace before you get to that final circle, otherwise you might find yourself surviving that journey through the storm only to be pushed into that final small circle to fight the boss, and you've used all of your heals in order to keep you alive during that journey for the storm. So once you notice that it's beginning to close in, you kind of need to know, based on how much damage you've done to the enemy that you're fighting already, you need to be able to get used to making that snap judgment that can you kill them quick enough and then start running. Otherwise, staying behind to get that little extra bit of XP and potentially another drop, which is RNG related, it could end up being something you don't necessarily even need, and then you get stuck in the storm and die, which of course is a major downside to your run. The next important thing that you need to know is the weakness of the Nightlord you are facing. Enemies in Souls games, and most games really, are usually weak to some elements and strong to others. The Nightlords in Nightreign are no different, but the advantage that you gain from utilising their weakness element is a much bigger deal than you may think, and it's surprising how many people don't know this. Attacking a Nightlord with their weakness element not only deals better damage, as you would expect, but can actually delay, interrupt, or even outright break some of their abilities. The Gaping Maw dragon boss, for example, becomes slow and sluggish when poisoned. The Dark Drift Knight can be interrupted out of his most powerful abilities when hit with lightning. This comes back to what we mentioned during the pathing section. The enemy camps on the map, as you are looking and planning your routes, have elemental symbols on them. This gives you an idea of what kind of enemies you will fight there, but also what kind of loot you can find. Of course, it is still RNG related. So if you're facing a Nightlord who's weak to lightning, like the Dark Drift Knight, you want to make sure that you hit all of the enemy camps on the map with the lightning symbol before the end of the first 2 days to try and ensure that you get a lightning weapon or spell for when you reach the final encounter against the Nightlord. Learning the layouts of locations is very useful as well, as there will often be weapon racks or staff racks in some of these locations that guarantee to drop magical staffs, seals. You can find bow racks that will drop bows or other ranged weapons, and these appear in the specific enemy camps all the time, so potentially giving you extra chances to get elemental weapons or spells if you have not found one already. Now, with a game that gives random loot drops, you may still find yourself getting to the Nightlord completely lacking a weapon or spell that has the right element. Now, whilst this doesn't mean that you can't win, it does mean that you are in for a much tougher fight, and some of the more difficult Nightlords can feel almost impossible when in this situation. If your loot luck has indeed been bad, all you can really do is try your best, try and learn the boss's attacks as best you can, ready for the next encounter. Obviously, a big thing that differs with this game compared to other Souls games is if you get to a boss in a normal Souls game or Elden Ring, you can die, and then essentially most of these bosses have a bonfire or site of grace right outside, so you can just go straight back into the boss, and even if you die multiple times, you get to keep fighting them over and over and over to learn their attack patterns, whereas the big difference with Nightreign is it takes like 40 minutes to get to the Nightlord. So if you get to the Nightlord and then you die because you're not used to their attacks, you haven't quite figured out like the dodge timing or the area, and you end up getting hit by attacks that have a bigger reach than you thought they would, you then have to wait and go through another 40-minute cycle to get to fight them again. So obviously try and get as much practice in as you can. If you are struggling against a particular Nightlord, as I say, all you can really do is keep trying, do your best, and as we would always do in any Souls game, try and study and learn the attack patterns of the boss as best you can. Finally, another very important thing to learn, which should go without saying, is making sure you know your chosen Nightfarers' strengths and weaknesses, as well as having a good understanding of their abilities and when is best to use them. Take some time in the training area to practice with the characters, as understanding their abilities doesn't just mean knowing what they do, but even things like cast and activation times are important, so you don't leave yourself vulnerable while trying to fire off an ability. It's also good to know which abilities you want to be using as often as you can, such as Wilder's Claw Shot, which you can use to get in close and get hits in on the enemy, which you will find yourself using pretty much as soon as the cooldown is reduced, or at least that's usually what I do, as long as it's safe to do so, and those that should be saved for opportune moments. If your ultimate ability does damage, for example, you may want to save it for when a boss is charging up a big attack in an attempt to stun them or break their stance, rather than just throwing it out as soon as it's charged just to do some extra damage. Likewise, characters like Guardian have an ult that does do damage to the boss, but can be saved for a clutch revive if things are going south. Knowing the stats your character scales with also help you know what kind of weapons you should be prioritizing when given your loot options, so as to maximize your overall damage. Now, all characters can actually use all weapons, but because of the scaling, let's say Raider, for example, is not going to be doing his best if you've got him equipped with a glintstone staff and trying to use magic, nor will the Revenant be at her best if you've given her an ultra great sword. You can still win with these loadouts, as long as you're good enough enough, right? You can make do, but for beginners I would not recommend it, as you are limiting your character's performance and not reaching their full potential if you're not using the correct weapons for their scaling. The character's scaling can be seen in the journal menu, which I think is something a lot of people don't necessarily even open up, and that will give you an idea of what weapons are best to use. I would also recommend getting the hang of more than one character, because whilst in theory any team of 3 Nightfarers can win runs, especially if all the players are at a high skill level, know the boss's attack patterns, certain team comps will work better than others. For example, the Libra boss can be knocked out of his power-up ritual by a hard-hitting ultimate ability, but let's say you go into the expedition against that particular Nightlord and your team is, let's say, Raider, Duchess and Revenant, you have no ultimates on your team at all that are actually like big damage attacks. Therefore you will not be able to do that and can only focus on destroying all the sigils that appear, otherwise he goes into his crazy rage mode. Another good reason to play as the different characters is to unlock and play the chapters of their remembrances. So these obviously give you the lore and story for each Nightfarer, but even if that's not something you're particularly interested in, like you're not too bothered about the backstory or the lore, you just want to play the game, you do also receive special relics by completing these chapters that can be equipped and often give special effects to your abilities. Like for example, Wilder gets an equip that makes his claw shot regular attack follow-up give his weapon a fire damage buff, which can obviously be very useful against certain enemies, or Revenant gets a relic that can be equipped that when her spirit summons are active, she gets a buff. So obviously, as you're ideally using at least one of them almost all the time in any major encounter, that means you're going to have a buff active almost all of the time, and you get these just by playing through the remembrance chapters. So there you have it. Those are some of the ways to make Nightreign easier for you and make sure that your runs are more successful. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Let me know if you've been doing any of these things already. Do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. There'll be plenty more Nightreign tips, guides and gameplay coming very soon.